Jamison, good to see you. Happy Friday. Thanks for taking the time today.
Great to see you, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Super. So we want to talk about nearly human today. We want to talk about community banks. As I think of community banks, in many cases, they have many of the same challenges and opportunities as the bigger banks, but a fraction of the resources, fraction of the money. But they still have a lot of the challenges and pain points, right? So you have something which is clearly generating a lot of buzz. It's caught the interest of a bunch of people over here on my team. Tell me, if you would be so kind, as to the genesis of this. Now, I don't want
Sure.
to take away from your brilliance, but I think it was partially someone else's idea as well. You have to share some of
Well,
the
that's the
credit.
important part, right? It's the problem that your client is having that is the focus of this, right? The technology is just a tool. And so we were in this interesting position where we'd been in this natural language space for we've been doing this for about 12 years. So 2+ years ago when ChatGPT landed, we'd been in this language space a long time, and so we immediately, saw this like step function of capability that it exploded. And we'd been following, the GPT stuff at OpenAI for years leading up to that, but this was just so dramatically better that we're like, this is the moment. Like we can get after some of these more high value problems with this technology. So I started talking about it on LinkedIn. The president of this bank actually like reached out to me after seeing some of the things I was talking about. And was like, he's like, Jameson, like here's what's going on. He's like, we have this operational problem in the bank, like trying to stay compliant and serve our customers really well. He's like, based on what you're saying, like it sounds like this should work for our issue. What do you think? And I was like, absolutely. I think this is like a straight down the middle opportunity when done correctly. So there's a lot of nuance to it, but I was like, we can figure this out. So we got in there, we understood, learned the problem, and fast forward to now, we have this, amazing relationship and case
Okay.
study with these
All
guys.
right. So we want to get into that a bit. Well, a couple takeaways I have from that story. Number one is never underestimate the value of sharing on LinkedIn, right? There's people watching, and you may say something that may trigger a thought. And it could be business for you, or it could just be something to help someone, as they're wrestling. So that's one of my takeaways from that story. The other one, even more intriguing for me, is so that president was like sharp enough to actually think of like almost like a repurposed use of what you were building, right? So there are so many people out there where something may be built for the government and maybe it's good for a bank, or something's built for insurance company, maybe it's good for a healthcare company. So very interesting as I think about that. So what were, if you had to maybe pick maybe three problems that you were asked to solve, what would be top three on the list?
So the biggest thing, it all boils down to customer experience, but there's a lot that goes on there. What was detracting from customer experience was sort of a combination of just like work overwhelm, chaotic communication, and then like just a disconnect that caused a lot of delay. And so the way this like looked in practice is that the bank would internally have a compliance organization. So these were the experts that were able to like answer uh, customer facing employees questions and make sure that like policy procedures followed and they stay in compliance with everything they're doing. But the problem was that there was a lot going on, and so this compliance office that was overseeing the operations, they were just constantly being bombarded by the same questions over and over again from lots of different people. Sometimes it was a phone call, sometimes it's an email, sometimes it's a DM on Teams. It was coming from all places. What ended up happening is just they were just overwhelmed with all of this, and so from the front of house employees' perspective, they just couldn't get the answers in time. So they were either like guessing and making mistakes that could cause compliance issues, or they were telling the customer they had to like wait, or worse yet, like come back later. So it was a mess, and everybody was frustrated. The customers were frustrated. The employees were frustrated with one another. So it was a tense situation.
Yeah, so nobody's happy in that scenario, right? So what you provided for that bank was, as I saw it, it allowed them to keep kind of a high touch front end, but with kind of a high tech back end, right? It wasn't like, hey, we're not putting AI to our clients. We want to be old school, and that's okay. There's people out there that could debate that, but in this case, you're saying fine, right? If anything, you're allowed to improve, as I understood it, you're allowed to improve the response time, improve the accuracy of the response? And then how about in the back end? How did the operations people feel? Did they feel like did they like you or not like you, or where were they?
So, there was admittedly, there was some hesitance at first, right? There's always this fear when this technology comes in of like, oh, when we talk about like automating this process, people look at it and they're like, well, that's my job, right?
Right.
And and there's all kinds of emotional things. But once we got the team engaged, and we really worked with them to kind of like bring their ideas into the platform, we started to get buy-in. And once we had some buy-in, we were able to implement an amazing system that automated 80% of the routine questions and just the volume that was coming to them. And ultimately, like it was just a full success story on the operations side of the house because like they didn't want to like answer the same question 1,000 times over, and
Right.
that was like a misuse of their expertise anyway, right? So we could just automate that stuff away. That was the stuff that frustrated them about their coworkers, right? So once we automated that away, then all of a sudden like their workload in terms of the frenzy like came down, right? So two things happened immediately. One is that those more complex issues that we've configured the system to recognize as something it's not able to accurately handle. It needs a human expert. They're like Johnny on the spot because they've got the availability, and these are more interesting problems for them to work. And then on top of it, that freed up time for them to go be strategic about their policy guidance
Right.
and get their documentation together and like really like work at their kind of like highest best use of their time. And then the cherry on top is that after just like a couple of months running this thing, the bank promoted two of the people out of operations into more strategic roles in the bank. So it just like, it turned into
Yeah,
opportunity for
yeah.
everyone.
It got better. So as I'm keeping track in my mind, increased customer experience, or let's say plain old fashioned good service, right? As far as customer facing, operations was happy. They got to be freed up to do what they always wanted to do when they took that job, right? Not get just pulled into the mud of all that tedious nonsense that tortures everybody in those roles. How did they justify the spend? What did that business case look like?
Well, I mean, it ended up being a complete no-brainer, right? So this particular bank had like literally doubled their size with a massive acquisition, which ended up being successful. But in doing that, not only did they not have to like surge that hire for their operations to handle all of the new staff, but they were actually able to handle it and also, promote some of these people into other positions in the bank. And of course, like operations is like completely overhead, right? So, the spend there, like the reduction in labor alone was a 400% ROI. But the funny thing is that like even though it had that powerful of an ROI in just a few months, the president of the bank like doesn't even want to talk about that because the transformation that he's seen in the customer experience is really like where he actually sees the value. That's a little tougher, like that's a softer value than just like the hard labor numbers that you can
Mhm.
calculate. But that's really where he sees the bulk of the value. So it's faster service. It's more accurate service. So, there's no like calling people back because a mistake got made or you got to hammer out some like compliance issue. The front of house folks that are like the first people that they interact with are now capable of handling more and more complex things like right off the bat because they've got this assistant right there. So the whole thing is has been a win from their perspective.
Wonderful. James, with the 2 minutes we have left, what is your message for those who are either, let's say, business leaders or operational leaders in community banks will watch this? What is your message or parting thought for them?
Well, the thing here is that like we can get this done really fast, right? So we can roll this out in 2 weeks' time, and it's also extremely low risk. So we're not touching your core systems. We are integrating with your Microsoft 365, so you get total control over who can and can't access the system. You can see everything that's going on. You keep humans in the loop. Um, and the beauty of this is so it's a great way to inject AI into your process at extremely low risk. And the interesting thing as we go forward is that, like you mentioned before, like these are high touch scenarios. At this point, it's like, why not move forward with this AI? It's extremely low risk, and you can actually like lean into the person to person contact. Like as we automate more and more of everything, especially from like the larger banks, this can be a differentiator for community banks where people want to go and actually like talk to a person and also feel very well served when that conversation happens.
Great. Jameson, Nearly Human. What's the URL? Somebody wants to check you out?
www.nearlyhuman.ai.
Oh, awesome. Super. Thanks again, Jameson.
Thank you, Frank. Great to talk to you.